In a quiet corner of the Philippines, beneath the flicker of a dim yellow bulb, a young boy strummed his old, second-hand guitar as though it were his soul's only voice. The strings were worn, and the wood had scratches that told stories of many nights spent chasing a dream no one else could see. His name was Raphael, but in his little town, everyone affectionately called him Elvis, because of the way he slicked back his hair and wore his old leather jacket, pretending it was the famous white rhinestone suit he'd seen once on TV. On the walls of his small room hung a tattered poster of Elvis Presley, his idol, his inspiration, his silent teacher. Every night as the crickets sang outside and the world went to sleep, Raphael sang, "Can't Help Falling in Love," his voice echoing through the night air, soft yet full of longing. His mother would sit quietly by the door watching him. Her eyes were tired from long days of work, but they softened whenever she heard him sing. It reminded her of her late husband, who had once dreamed of being a musician too but never got the chance. She saw that same spark in her son, the same unstoppable fire. Sometimes, she'd whisper a prayer under her breath, hoping the world would one day hear his voice. Life wasn't easy for them. Their home was small, built from bamboo and tin, perched near the edge of the town where the lights faded early. Every peso they earned went to food and school fees, yet Raphael saved what little he could. Coins he found after playing music at weddings, fiestas, and sometimes just for neighbors who wanted to hear something beautiful after a long day. People laughed kindly when they called him the Filipino Elvis, but Raphael took it seriously. To him, it wasn't just an imitation, it was a promise to himself. Elvis wasn't just an icon. He was a symbol of hope, proof that a poor boy from nowhere could become someone the whole world adored. Raphael studied every Elvis performance he could find on the old TV in the town plaza, memorizing every move, every smirk, every note. When he sang, it wasn't just mimicry, it was like he was channeling a spirit that lived deep within him. Yet, even with all that talent, no one imagined he'd ever make it beyond the village. Dreams like his often stayed trapped in small towns, fading with the years. But Raphael refused to let his fade. He believed that music could break any barrier, even distance, even poverty. One day during the town festival, he got the chance to perform on a small stage for the first time. The microphone crackled, the speakers buzzed, and the lights were too dim to see the crowd clearly. Still, when he began to sing "Suspicious Minds," something magical happened. The crowd went silent, truly silent. His voice was raw, heartfelt, and full of power that didn't come from fame or technique, but from pure emotion. When the song ended, applause erupted, and for the first time in his life, Raphael felt seen. In that moment, he didn't just feel like a small town boy pretending to be Elvis. He felt like he was someone capable of touching hearts the way Elvis once did. Later that night, his mother hugged him tightly. "Anak," she whispered, "my son, the world will hear you one day." He smiled, but deep down he wasn't sure how that could ever happen. He didn't have money for travel, for equipment, not even for proper shoes. All he had was a dream. But sometimes a dream is enough. He started uploading short videos to social media, singing Elvis classics with his signature Filipino warmth. He didn't expect much. The internet connection in their town was slow, sometimes barely working, but he stayed patient. Little by little, people started sharing his videos. A few comments came from other countries. "You sound like Elvis reincarnated. This voice has soul." Those words lit a fire in his heart. One evening, as he played his guitar under the same flickering light, he imagined something impossible. Standing on the grand stage of America's Got Talent. He pictured Simon Cowell sitting at that famous judging table, the audience waiting, the lights glowing, and himself standing there in his white Elvis suit, singing to the world. The thought made his heart race. Could a Filipino boy from a tiny town truly reach that stage? He didn't know, but the dream felt real enough to chase. As the night deepened, Raphael looked at the old Elvis poster and whispered, "Someday, they'll know my voice too." His mother called him to eat, and he put down his guitar, smiling softly. He didn't realize that the journey had already begun. Every note he sang, every moment he believed, was taking him one step closer to that distant dream. Outside, the stars glimmered over the quiet Philippine sky, and the sound of the ocean breeze carried his song through the night. A song of faith, struggle, and destiny. And though no one knew it yet, that small town dreamer, singing in the shadows of poverty, was about to shock the world. The morning Raphael left the Philippines, the sun rose gently over the rice fields, painting the horizon with gold. The small town that had been his world for so long was just beginning to stir. Roosters crowed, tricycles rumbled down the narrow dirt road, and neighbors waved goodbye as he walked toward the bus station with a single suitcase in hand. That suitcase wasn't heavy with clothes or things, it was heavy with dreams. Inside were only a few shirts, his worn leather jacket, his guitar, and a folded photo of him and his mother. Everything else he carried was invisible, but far more precious, the hope of a lifetime. His mother walked beside him, her hand clutching a small handkerchief to hide her trembling. She had spent years working, sewing clothes for neighbors and selling rice cakes just to help him save for this one trip. She didn't say much, only smiled as if to hold back the flood of emotions that might stop him from going. Before he boarded the bus, she reached into her bag and handed him a small gold cross. "Keep this with you," she said softly. "No matter how far you go, God will be near." Rafael hugged her tightly, the kind of hug that says everything words can't. Then the bus door closed, and as it rolled away, she stood there waving, her figure growing smaller in the dust. The journey to the airport was long and filled with thoughts. Rafael looked out the window as the scenery changed, from green fields to crowded highways, from quiet villages to the sprawling chaos of Manila. Everything felt surreal. For the first time in his life he was about to leave his country. As he stepped into the airport surrounded by travelers with big suitcases and confident smiles, he felt small but determined. His ticket to America was more than a piece of paper. It was the bridge between who he had been and who he might become. When the plane finally took off, Rafael pressed his forehead against the cold window, watching the Philippines shrink below him. It looked peaceful from above, a mosaic of mountains and sea, like a painting he was leaving behind. The hum of the engines blended with the soft hum of the song playing in his mind. "If I Can Dream," by Elvis Presley. That song had always been his favorite because it spoke of hope and change, the belief that one voice could make a difference. He whispered the lyrics quietly, his reflection in the glass showing both fear and excitement. Hours later, as the plane descended into Los Angeles, his heart pounded. The city below glowed like a universe of stars. He had seen it only in movies and videos, freeways, skyscrapers, endless lights. Now it was real, right beneath him. When the plane touched down, a single tear slipped down his cheek. He had made it. The boy from a small town in the Philippines was now standing in the land of dreams. The first breath of American air felt different, colder, sharper, full of energy. The airport was massive, full of noise, languages he didn't understand, and faces from every corner of the world. He clutched his guitar tightly, afraid it might get lost in the crowd. The security guards smiled politely when they saw the nervous young man carrying a guitar case covered with stickers and tape. "You a musician?" one of them asked. Rafael nodded shyly. "Trying to be, sir." Outside the terminal the world was overwhelming. Cars rushed by, lights blinked, and billboards flashed faces of stars he had only ever watched on TV. Somewhere in this giant city the auditions for America's Got Talent awaited. He took a deep breath, pulled out a small map from his pocket, and began walking toward the bus stop, his heart guiding him more than his feet. The next few days were not easy. Rafael stayed in a cheap hostel with thin walls and a creaky bed. He practiced every night in the shared kitchen, earning both smiles and confused looks from the other travelers. Some clapped, others just listened quietly. One old man, a retired musician, told him, "You've got something special, kid. Don't lose it." Those words became his fuel. Finally, the day of the audition arrived. Rafael stood in line outside the AGT building, surrounded by hundreds of performers, dancers, magicians, singers, comedians. They all looked confident, dressed in colorful costumes, carrying instruments and props. He looked down at his simple outfit, white shirt, his old jacket, and his polished shoes. His hands were trembling slightly as he held his guitar. He thought of his mother back home, probably awake at that very moment, praying for him. When he finally entered the audition hall, the lights were brighter than he imagined. The AGT banner hung proudly in the background. Staff members guided him through the process. "Sign the paper, wait in line, keep calm." He sat quietly, watching others perform on the monitors. Some were good, some not so much. Each performance brought him closer to his own turn, and his nerves grew heavier. At one point, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Lord, this is my moment. Please let them hear what I feel." He took a deep breath, feeling the small cross around his neck. The same cross his mother had given him glowed faintly against his skin. Then a voice called, "Next, Rafael from the Philippines." He stood up, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the door leading to the stage. Behind that door, he knew the lights, the judges, and the entire world were waiting. Every step echoed like a heartbeat, each one carrying the weight of his past and the hope of his future. He paused just before entering, took one last breath, and whispered to himself, "For you, Mama, and for everyone who ever dreamed." As he stepped into the bright glare of the stage lights, the crowd buzzed with curiosity. They saw a young Filipino man dressed like Elvis, holding a guitar with trembling hands. Some smiled, some chuckled. But Rafael didn't see them as strangers. To him, They were the world he had promised to reach. In that moment, all the miles he had traveled, all the nights he had sung under a flickering bulb, all the tears his mother had shed, they all led to this. He wasn't just a boy from a faraway town anymore. He was a dream standing on the edge of destiny, ready to sing his heart to the world. The air inside the America's Got Talent auditorium was electric, buzzing with the nervous energy of 1,000 dreams waiting to be heard. The lights from the massive stage shimmered across the audience, casting moving patterns of blue and gold. Rafael stood in the shadows behind the curtain, clutching his guitar so tightly his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded hard against his chest, every beat echoing the rhythm of his fear and excitement. This was the moment he had imagined countless nights back home. But now that it was real, it felt almost unreal. His palms were sweating, his throat dry. All around him, stagehands moved quickly, cameras rolled, and the distant hum of the crowd filled the air like a tide about to rise. A producer leaned toward him and smiled. "You're next." "Ready." Rafael nodded, though his body trembled. He closed his eyes and took a slow breath, feeling the cool metal of the small cross resting against his skin. He whispered a quiet prayer in Tagalog. "Dios ko, tulungan mo ako." "My God, help me." For a moment everything stilled. The noise faded. The lights behind the curtain became a soft blur. In his mind, he was back home again, singing in his small room under that flickering bulb, with his mother smiling proudly in the doorway. That memory gave him strength. Then the curtain lifted, the crowd stretched before him like an ocean of faces. Bright lights blinded him for a moment, and the stage felt impossibly big. He could barely see the judges, but he knew who they were. Simon Cowell, with that familiar expression of quiet curiosity, Sofia Vergara and Heidi Klum, whispering to each other, and Howie Mandel, smiling as he glanced at the young man standing on stage. The giant AGT logo glowed behind him, and the air was thick with expectation. "Hello there," Simon said, his voice calm but cutting through the room. "What's your name, and where are you from?" Rafael swallowed hard before answering. "My name is Rafael, sir. I'm from the Philippines." His accent was soft but clear. The crowd murmured with interest. They always loved an international contestant. Simon tilted his head slightly. "And what are you gonna do for us today?" "I'm gonna sing," Rafael replied, gripping his guitar a little tighter. "What kind of music?" Simon asked, his tone half curious, half skeptical. "Elvis Presley songs," Rafael said, smiling nervously. The audience chuckled and Simon raised an eyebrow. It wasn't the first time someone had come dressed like Elvis, and many had failed to impress. "Okay," Simon said slowly. "We've seen a lot of Elvis impersonators over the years. Why do you think you're different?" Rafael hesitated, then looked Simon directly in the eyes. "Because I don't just sing Elvis, sir. I sing from the heart, from my home." His voice trembled slightly, but his sincerity silenced the crowd. Even Simon leaned back, intrigued by the confidence hidden behind the nervousness. The stage manager gave him a nod from the side. The spotlight centered on him. The audience quieted. The band waited for his cue. Rafael took one last breath and whispered to himself, "For Mama." For a heartbeat, there was total silence. The kind that feels heavy, almost sacred. He could hear the faint rustling of the audience, the quiet tapping of a camera lens focusing in on his face. He looked at the guitar in his hands, fingers shaking slightly as they found their place on the strings. He thought about every night he had practiced under the dim light, about the people who had laughed at his dream, and about the single tear that had rolled down his mother's face when he boarded the bus. This was his chance to prove that all of it had meant something. The MC's voice echoed faintly in his ears. "Whenever you're ready." Rafael strummed the first chord. It was soft, trembling at first, then steady. The sound filled the auditorium like the first drop of rain in a silent field. He closed his eyes and began to sing the opening lines of "Can't Help Falling in Love." His voice was deep and pure, with that unmistakable Elvis tone, but there was something different, something warmer, something heartbreakingly human. The first few notes made the audience shift in their seats. Simon leaned forward slightly, his arms uncrossed now. Rafael could feel the change in the air. That magical shift when the audience stops judging and starts listening. His nerves began to melt away as his voice carried across the stage, strong and rich, filled with emotion that words alone couldn't hold. He opened his eyes and looked out into the lights. He couldn't see faces, but he felt them. Every pair of eyes, every heart locked on him. Each note he sang came from a place of longing, of faith, of love. The music wasn't just sound, it was his entire life turned into melody. Every word carried the pain of struggle and the joy of hope. Halfway through the song, he saw Simon's expression change. The skeptical smirk was gone, replaced by surprise, then awe. Heidi covered her mouth. Sophia whispered something to Howie and the audience grew completely still. It was as if time itself had stopped. Even the cameras seemed to slow, capturing the raw magic of that moment. A young man from a distant land resurrecting the voice of a legend, but with a soul all his own. As Raphael sang the final lines, his voice trembled with emotion. He ended softly, the last word lingering in the air long after the music faded. For a second, there was silence, the kind of silence that happens only when hearts are too full to react. Then, like a wave, the applause erupted. The entire audience stood clapping, cheering, some even crying. Raphael stood frozen, breathing hard, eyes glistening. He looked at Simon, who was still staring at him, speechless. Finally, Simon smiled, a genuine, rare smile. "You know what, Raphael," he said slowly, his voice almost gentle, "I didn't expect that. You didn't just sing like Elvis, you sang like yourself. And that was incredible." The crowd roared again and Raphael's heart felt like it might burst. He had done it. All the fear, all the waiting, all the nights of dreaming, it had led to this one miraculous moment. He closed his eyes and whispered one last time, "Thank you, Mama." Under the bright lights of the AGT stage, the Filipino Elvis had finally found his place in the world. Not as an imitator, but as a voice that could move hearts across oceans. When Raphael's first note filled the America's Got Talent stage, time seemed to stop. The sound was so pure, so full of emotion, that it rippled through the silence like a wave. Every person in the audience, from the back row to the front, felt something shift inside them. This wasn't just a tribute act or a simple imitation of a legend. This was a voice reborn from a place of truth, carrying the heart of the Philippines and the soul of Elvis Presley. His voice climbed and fell like waves, tender in one moment and thunderous the next, echoing through the vast theater as if the walls themselves wanted to listen. Simon Cowell, known for his unflinching poker face, leaned forward in his seat. His expression softened as the notes rolled out, perfectly pitched but filled with an H that no technique could teach. It was the kind of performance that stripped away pretense. For once even Simon's sharp eyes looked uncertain, not in doubt, but in awe. Raphael's voice had pierced through the noise, through the skepticism, through the years of watching thousands of performers come and go. This one felt different. As the song built toward its chorus, the audience began to realize what they were witnessing. The tension in the room transformed into wonder. People stopped whispering, stopped filming, stopped moving. Every word that left Raphael's lips carried the weight of the miles he had traveled and the sacrifices that had brought him here. His tone was hauntingly familiar, unmistakably Elvis. But it was carried by something deeper, the sincerity of someone who had lived every lyric. A few audience members stood up midway through the song, hands clasped over their hearts. One woman in the front row wiped tears from her eyes. The judges, who had expected a novelty act, now sat motionless, mesmerized. It wasn't just the sound, it was the feeling. It was that invisible magic that only a few performers in history have ever had. That ability to make a song feel like it belongs to everyone listening. Raphael closed his eyes as he sang, letting the emotion pour through him. His voice soared, smooth and full of soul, carrying echoes of old radio recordings but laced with something modern, something raw. He sang as if he was standing in his tiny village again, as if his mother were right there in front of him, smiling proudly. The lights from above shone down like a halo, illuminating the shimmer of sweat on his brow, the glint of tears in his eyes. When he reached the high note near the end, the crowd collectively gasped. It wasn't just a note, it was a cry, a declaration, a prayer. It was the sound of years of longing compressed into one unforgettable moment. The last chord rang out, and Raphael held it for just a second longer than anyone expected, then let it fade slowly, beautifully, into silence. The silence that followed was unlike any other. It was deep, almost sacred. No one dared to clap yet, afraid to break the spell. Raphael lowered his guitar slightly, breathing hard, looking out into the blinding lights. For a moment, he didn't know if they had loved it or not. All he could hear was the pounding of his heart. Then it happened. One clap, then another, then hundreds. In seconds, the theater erupted. The entire audience stood cheering, shouting, crying. People waved their hands in the air, calling his name. It was as if the world had suddenly realized they had just witnessed something that would be remembered for years. The energy flooded the stage and Raphael's eyes filled with tears. He bowed deeply, overwhelmed. Simon Cowell stood up slowly, clapping with a smile that could only mean one thing: respect. He turned to the other judges, who were already on their feet. Heidi Klum placed her hand over her heart, whispering, "That was beautiful." Sofia Vergara clapped through tears, shaking her head in disbelief. Howie Mandel pointed toward Raphael and said, "That was perfection." When the cheers finally quieted enough for Simon to speak, his voice was softer than usual. "Raphael," he said, "I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen people try to imitate legends, and it almost never works. But what you just did, that wasn't imitation, that was reincarnation. You brought Elvis back, but with your heart, your story, your soul." The crowd roared again, and Rafal could barely keep his composure. His lips trembled as he said, "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." His accent made his words sound even more genuine, even more heartfelt. Simon continued, smiling faintly. "I'll be honest. When you said you were going to sing Elvis, I thought, here we go again. But then you started singing and I felt chills. You reminded us why we love music in the first place, because of how it makes us feel." The audience applauded once more, chanting his name. "Rafal! Rafal! Rafal!" He couldn't believe it. The moment felt like a dream he didn't want to wake from. His entire life. The late nights practicing under a flickering bulb, the years of saving money, the pain of saying goodbye to his mother, had all led to this stage, this applause, this validation. As he walked off the stage, tears streamed down his face. The crew backstage clapped and congratulated him, patting his shoulder, smiling like proud friends. One of them said, "You just made history, man." Rafal laughed through his tears, still shaking. "I can't believe it," he whispered. "I really can't." Meanwhile, inside the auditorium, the audience was still buzzing. Clips of his performance were already being uploaded by fans to social media. Within minutes, they began to spread. Comments flooded in from around the world. "Who is this Filipino Elvis? This gave me chills. Elvis lives again through him." The video hit 1 million views within hours. That night, as Rafal sat alone in his hotel room, he looked at his phone screen glowing with notifications. He scrolled through comments in disbelief, his heart overflowing with gratitude. Then he opened a video message from his mother. She was crying but smiling, her voice trembling with pride. "I saw you in act," she said. "The whole world saw you. I told you, they would hear your voice." Rafal held the phone close to his heart and looked out the window at the bright Los Angeles skyline. The lights shimmered like the stars over his small hometown. He realized he had done more than just sing. He had connected 2 worlds, 2 hearts, 2 dreams. That night, the voice of a Filipino boy had shaken the world, and the echo of it would never fade. The next morning, Rafal woke to the sound of his phone buzzing non-stop. The room was dimly lit by the first rays of sunlight slipping through the curtains, and for a moment, he thought he was still dreaming. He blinked at the screen. Hundreds of messages, thousands of notifications, endless calls from unknown numbers. He rubbed his eyes, sat up slowly, and realized what had happened. Overnight, the world had discovered him. His America's Got Talent performance had gone viral. The video of him singing Elvis's timeless ballad had spread like wildfire across every platform. On YouTube, millions had already watched it. On TikTok, fans were making clips of his most powerful moments. On Twitter and Facebook, hashtags were trending: the Filipino Elvis, a Rafal on each fan, the voice that moved the world. Comments flooded in from every corner of the globe. From America, the UK, Japan, and, most importantly, his home, the Philippines. People called him, the reborn Elvis, the soul from the islands, and, the voice that time forgot. In one clip, Simon Cowell's words were replayed over and over. "You didn't just sing Elvis, you sang with your soul." That sentence alone was enough to give Rafal goosebumps each time he heard it. Sitting there in his small hotel room, still wearing the same leather jacket from the night before, he covered his face with his hands and cried. These weren't tears of sadness or even shock. They were the tears of someone who had been unseen for too long and finally felt visible to the world. Back home, the reaction was overwhelming. His entire village gathered in front of the one house with a television. Neighbors, friends, even strangers from nearby towns came to watch the replay on the news. The small living room was packed, people standing shoulder to shoulder, eyes glued to the screen. His mother sat in the front, her hands clasped tightly, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son sing under the bright American lights. When the clip ended, the crowd erupted in cheers. Someone shouted, "That's our boy!" And the whole village clapped as though they had all won something together. The next day, local radio stations started playing his audition clip. Newspapers printed his picture with headlines like, "From small town to stardom, the Filipino Elvis stuns the world." Interviews were requested, TV shows called for appearances, and even international journalists wanted to know more about this humble young man whose voice had captured millions of hearts. His story wasn't just about talent anymore. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that dreams could rise from the simplest beginnings. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Rafal was struggling to take it all in. The AGT producers called him back for an interview, and as he walked through the studio hallways, people recognized him everywhere. Crew members smiled, others stopped him just to shake his hand or say, "You made us cry last night." One of the camera operators told him, "You have no idea how many people you've touched." He smiled shyly, still unable to believe it. That evening, he went live on social media for the first time. Tens of thousands of people joined instantly. The comment section moved so fast he couldn't even read it all. "We love you, Raphael. You brought Elvis back to life. Greetings from London. Proud to be Filipino." His voice trembled as he spoke. "I don't know what to say. I just want to thank everyone who believed in me. I came here with nothing but a dream. And now I feel like I have a whole world standing beside me." As days passed, the momentum didn't stop. Radio hosts discussed his performance, celebrities tweeted about him, and fan pages began posting comparisons between Raphael and Elvis. Even old Elvis tribute groups reached out, calling him the Filipino torchbearer of the king's legacy. But the most touching message came from an elderly fan in Memphis who wrote, "Elvis would have been proud of you, son. You didn't just copy him, you honored him." The love he received became a bridge between two worlds, between generations, between East and West, between the past and the present. Fans in America adored his voice. Filipinos saw him as a national treasure. For once, the world wasn't divided by language or borders, they were united by music. Raphael realized that this was bigger than fame. This was about connection, about showing that no matter where you come from, your heart can still touch the world if you dare to let it sing. One night, he sat alone by his hotel window, looking at the glittering skyline of Los Angeles. He thought of his mother again. The nights she stayed awake listening to him practice, the quiet prayers she whispered every time he sang. He unlocked his phone and opened a video message she had sent earlier that evening. Her voice trembled as she said, "I saw you, Anak. I saw you make them all listen. I told you the world would hear your voice. I am so proud of you." Raphael pressed the phone to his chest and whispered, "I did it, Mama. I really did." Weeks later, when he returned to the Philippines for a short break, the airport was packed with fans holding banners and waving flags. They shouted his name, singing Elvis songs in celebration. He was overwhelmed, trying to greet as many as he could, hugging people, shaking hands, laughing and crying all at once. News cameras followed him as he stepped outside to a roaring crowd. He wasn't just Raphael anymore. He was the Filipino Elvis, a living dream, a symbol of pride for his country. That night, he performed in his hometown for the first time since AGT. The makeshift stage was decorated with fairy lights and flowers, the same way it had been years ago when he sang at local festivals. But this time, the whole town came. His mother sat in the front row, smiling with tears in her eyes. When he began to sing, "Can't Help Falling in Love," the same song that had changed his life, the crowd sang along with him. The stars glittered above, and the wind carried his voice through the night, across the fields, through the streets, all the way to the sea. As the song ended, Raphael looked out at the crowd, at the faces that had loved and believed in him from the very beginning. The applause roared like thunder, echoing far into the distance. In that moment, he understood something simple yet powerful: dreams don't belong to one person alone. They belong to everyone who believes, everyone who listens, everyone who dares to feel. The boy who once sang alone under a flickering bulb had now become the voice that united hearts across the world. The Filipino Elvis had arrived, not as a copy of a legend but as a legend of his own making.